All right, here we go. Utah Food Handlers, Section B. Food protection, destroying harmful pathogens, preventing foodborne contamination. SafeFoodTest.com. Welcome back. Section B. Got to remind you, this is warfare. The enemy comes in three different forms: biological, chemical, and physical nature. Biological: bacteria, viruses, parasites. Chemical: things like additives, allergens, natural toxins, toxic metals, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, things like that. Hard, sharp objects: glass, metal, plastic. Natural objects: shells, pits. Physical hazards: biological, chemical, physical. Don't forget about that. It's the enemy. Remember our friend Fat Tom? No, not your friend Fat Tom. The acronym that describes the characteristics that enable bacteria growth: food, acidity, time, temperature, oxygen, moisture. So certain things enable bacteria growth. Well, certain things then can kill a bacteria, destroy it, eliminate it. So we need to understand those parameters as well. We're going to be going through that. Let's take a look. So let's go through the minimum internal cooking temperatures. Let's start off with the highest one first, 165 for 15 seconds. That's going to cover things like poultry, whole and ground, chicken, turkey, duck. It's going to also include foods that are stuffed, stuffings made with fish, meat, poultry, stuffed meat, poultry, pasta, and then dishes that include previously cooked foods, TCS ingredients. Got to get those to 165, hold them for 15 seconds. Internal temp, right? Second category, 155 for 15 seconds. Minimum internal cooking temperature for ground meat like beef, pork, veal, lamb. Ejected meats, including brine, ham, flavor injected roasts, mechanically tenderized meat, ratites, and ostrich. What the heck? Yeah, those two. Including emu, ground seafood, chopped or minced seafood, shelled eggs that will be hot held for service. So there's going to be a couple temps on eggs. These are eggs that are going to be hot held, 155, then hot held at 135 or higher. But we got an interesting category here, 155 for 15 seconds. Ground meats, brine, injected meats, mechanically tenderized meats. Got some ratites, emu, ostrich, things like that going on. So 145 for 15 seconds, that's going to be my seafood. It's going to be my shellfish, crustaceans, finfish. It's going to be my whole cuts like steaks, chops, beef, pork, veal, lamb. Commercially raised game, 145 for 15 seconds. Shelled eggs are going to be immediately served or cooked for service, 145, 15 seconds. Another category here. Internal temp, right? 145, 15 seconds. So all these cook temps are based on internal temps. So you can imagine a roast, we got to get the internal temperature of the roast. Achieving that's going to be a little more difficult. So we've got some parameters here. Roast must be cooked to these parameters. 130, hold that for what? 112 minutes? Yes. 131, 89 minute hold. 131, 56 minute hold. You can see the higher the temp, the lower the hold time. So it turns out that we can hold it at a certain temp for a long time. We can also achieve destruction too. So you get down to 144, it's a 5-minute hold. You want to notice again, there's a relationship between time and temperature to eliminate the pathogens. Take a look at this. So our last category here, we got our fruits, vegetables, grains, rice, pasta, beans, that will be hot held for service, 135 on these. You're obviously going to probably go a lot higher than that to even prepare these foods, but 135 is going to be the minimum internal requirement for these. All right, for my microwave cooks out there, my microwave chefery here, for the microwave we got a flat requirement, 165, and there's a hold time requirement on that. We'll get into the details of microwave cooking, but it's 165 for my meat, my seafood, my poultry, my eggs. We want to make sure we have that internal temperature for all foods. It's going to be 165 in the microwave. So it's heating from the inside out for this food. So we want to make sure that we've got enough activity to get 165 to the internal temperature there in the whole time. Get into the details here right now. So some of these are kind of quality related, but these are some general guidelines for microwave chefery or cooking. So cover the food, rotate, stir it halfway through the cooking process so we evenly distribute the heat. Let it stand for 2 minutes after your cooking process, and then we'll check the temperature in a couple spots. Make sure we got our 165, right? So microwave cooking, microwave chefery, I like to call it. So you remember the TDZ, right? Temperature danger zone, 41 to 135. So when you're cooling foods, we talked about those. Remember, 6 hours goes from 135 to 72, 70, 41 or lower, and 6 hours. Now, when you're reheating foods, you got a cold food trying to get it hot. So we don't want to dilly dally, take all day. So we want to make sure we're reheating in a fashion that's getting us through that super danger zone rapidly. So food reheated for hot holding must be reheated to 165 for 15 seconds within 2 hours. All right, within 2 hours. So we're getting that through there and up to heat, not simmering all day. And then when you're talking about commercially processed foods, we're reheating those to at least 135. They've already been fully cooked by the manufacturer processor. We're gonna then reheat those to 135. So we did like the reverse to fat tong. We talked about instead of how to make them grow, how to kill them, right? So don't forget the parameters there. We got time, temperature, details we have to look at. We're looking at the internal temperature of the food. And these are different organisms are for different foods. So generally these temperatures are for a pertinent organism that's known to exist in these certain types of foods. Pretty interesting stuff. That's more of an advanced level, validating cooking times and temperatures. I have other advanced level classes through my website, safefoodtest.com, HACCP, giving some other things like that if you're interested. So cross-contamination is a big deal. So it's when pathogens are transferred from one surface or food to another surface or food, then continuing the problem. So if I scratch my butt and make a tuna sandwich, yes, that's gross, but it's cross-contamination, which could be a big problem. So cross-contamination can also occur when I add a contaminated ingredient to a food that's already been fully cooked and doesn't get further cooked. That'd be a problem. Or when a ready-to-eat food touches a dirty surface, contaminated surface. Or when contaminated food drips or onto cooked food or ready-to-eat food. Again, when a food handler touches himself or touches something that's contaminated, then touches ready-to-eat food. Or a contaminated wiping cloth is used to wipe down the surface. So these are problems, cross-contamination. We're going to get into this in more detail later in another section, but poor personal hygiene can cause foodborne illness. Just wanted to drop that in here. So don't forget to wash your hands properly. If you fail to wash your hands correctly after using the bathroom or coughing or sneezing, or you touch a wound, or and then touch food, or you touch yourself, then touch food, or you work while you're sick, these are ways that you can also contaminate or create a cross-contamination scenario. So as food handlers, we constantly have to be mindful of how things become unsafe. So poor cleaning and sanitizing can lead to contamination, can lead to unsafe food. So poor cleaning of equipment and utensils, they're not washed, rinsed, and sanitized properly. Food contact surfaces are wiped down instead of cleaned, being washed, rinsed, and sanitized. Wiping cloths, we got to make sure we store those in the sanitizing solution, not in our pocket or underneath the ice machine between uses. And then we got to make sure the sanitizer solutions are at the proper levels. We want to make sure that the cloth is in a sanitizing solution that's the proper concentration to prevent contamination. So you want to make sure you understand with some illnesses, a person can infect others before showing symptoms. For example, a person could spread hepatitis A for weeks before having any symptoms. With other illnesses such as norovirus, a person may infect others for days or even months after symptoms are gone. Some people also carry pathogens and infect others without getting sick themselves. These people are called carriers. The bacteria Staphylococcus aureus is carried in the nose of 30 to 50% of healthy adults. About 20 to 35% of healthy adults carry in their skin the Staphylococcus aureus bacteria. Food handlers transfer this type of bacteria to food when they touch infected areas on their body and when they touch food without washing their hands. Food handlers must manage their personal hygiene and make sure that they're reporting symptoms to their management, to the owner of the facility, and make sure that they're washed their hands after touching anything, after sneezing, coughing, Do not work while they're sick. A lot of detail here. Simple activities can contaminate food. For this reason, food handlers need to monitor what they do with their hands. Let's take a look at some of the actions that can contaminate food. Scratching your scalp, running fingers through your hair, wiping or touching your nose, rubbing an ear, touching a pimple or zit, infected wound, wearing a dirty uniform, coughing or sneezing into your hand, and spitting in the operation. If someone's spitting in your operation, we got bigger problems. As a food handler, remember you're the first line of defense. Many things can happen to the food as it passes through the supply chain. Remember, we got to have a boat to throat mentality, tied to tongue, farm to fork. So we got to understand the flow of food. We have to make sure we do all we can to prevent cross-contamination and time, temperature abuse during the flow of food, from purchasing to serving. Understand your flow and how things might happen during these different activities, and then implement or try to put things in place as a food handler to prevent those things. Each type of food should have separate equipment. For example, for cutting boards, utensils, and containers, we should know that certain types hold raw poultry, another type holds raw meat, different type for produce if possible. As a food handler, you need to be mindful of these things. Color coding can help prevent cross-contamination. But if you're not able to have color-coded equipment, you want to make sure you clean and sanitize your equipment and utensils after each task, okay, after each use. If you need to use the same table to prep different types of food, prep raw meat, fish, and poultry, and ready-to-eat food at different times. You must clean and sanitize work surfaces and utensils between each type of food. For example, by prepping ready-to-eat food before raw food, you can minimize the chance of cross-contamination. Buy food that doesn't require, or if you know that you're going to be doing a lot of preparation, you can buy things like prepared pre-cooked chicken breast, or you can buy shredded lettuce instead of shredding it yourself in-house, working with reputable suppliers, of course, to buy these things. So you can use single-use gloves to create a barrier between your hands and the food. You still need to wash your hands prior to donning the gloves. Gloves should be worn when handling ready-to-eat food. Now there are some exceptions when you're washing produce or you're handling ingredients that you're actually going to cook, then you wouldn't need gloves. So make sure the gloves, of course, fit. Make sure, of course, that gloves don't replace hand washing. As a food handler, it's important that you understand that food can be contaminated by handling it with bare hands, especially if your hands have not been properly washed or you have an infected cut or wound. For this reason, we do not recommend handling ready-to-eat food with your bare hands. There are times when it may be acceptable to handle ready-to-eat food with your bare hands, like ingredients that are going to be fully cooked. Never handle ready-to-eat food for high-risk populations, though. Make sure that you check with your local jurisdiction to see if there are any allowances for bare hand contact, and if there are, what procedures and policies should you have in place. Let's look at the how, when, and where of using utensils. So when should I use utensils? Definitely when I'm handling ready-to-eat foods to avoid direct contact with hands. You should use them during food preparation for mixing and stirring and serving. You should make sure that how to use them. Well, the how is make sure that you ensure that the utensils are properly cleaned and sanitized before use. Another way you should use them is you should have a different utensil for raw foods and cooked foods to avoid cross-contamination. Do not use utensils without cleaning them first, especially when switching between different types of food. Where should I use utensils? Well, in the food preparation area and in the service area. We want to make sure we use the appropriate utensil for preparation as well as in the service area to avoid direct hand contact, of course, in both areas. Let's talk about the how, when, and where of gloves. So, wash your hands before putting on gloves when starting a new task. You do not re-wash your hands each time you change your gloves, as long as you are performing the same task. and your hands have not been contaminated. Avoid contaminating gloves when putting them on. Make sure you use the correct size glove. Hold gloves by the edge when putting them on. Once gloves are on, make sure you're periodically checking them for tears and rips. Do not blow into your glove. Do not roll your gloves when putting them on. Sometimes when we wear gloves, we have a false sense of security, especially if they aren't changed often as they should be. Make sure that you change your gloves as soon as they become dirty or torn, or before you begin a new task that would require hand washing too. After you take a phone call or after you handle raw meat, poultry, and before handling ready-to-eat foods, make sure you change your gloves. We've been spending a lot of time looking at biological contamination. Just wanted to take a moment here and tell you a little bit about chemical contamination of food again. It can occur in a variety of sources and ways, including food additives intentionally, allergens. Those are the food is a hazard sometimes. Well, we use sanitizers improperly or cleaning chemicals improperly, or maybe the farm uses pesticides or we use pesticides in a way that aren't proper. This can happen both accidentally and intentionally. So we want to make sure that we use chemicals in the proper way as the instructions are on the label. We store the chemicals away from food. We never use chemical containers for storing food. We got to know about things like toxic metals like copper and pewter and zinc because they can contaminate food. We have to understand that sometimes there's toxins in food that can lead to harmful chemical reactions in the food. Make sure to ask your manager if you're not sure of an ingredient of the food. Allergens are considered a chemical hazard. A food allergen is a protein in a food or an ingredient that some people are sensitive to. These proteins occur naturally. When enough of the protein is eaten, an allergic reaction can occur. Some people, it's a minute amount that causes that reaction. While more than 160 food items can cause allergic reactions, just 9 of those foods account for 90% of all the reactions. The big 9 food allergens are milk, eggs, fish, crustaceans, including lobster, shrimp, and crab, wheat, soy, peanuts, tree nuts, and sesame. Depending on the person, an allergic reaction can happen just after the food is eaten or several hours later. This reaction could include some or all of the symptoms identified in the slide. Initially, symptoms can be mild, but they can often be serious very quickly. In severe cases, anaphylaxis, a severe allergic reaction, can lead to death. If a customer is having an allergic reaction to food, call the emergency number in your area and inform them of the allergic reaction. You should be aware of the symptoms of an allergic reaction, like nausea and wheezing, hives, itchy rash, swelling of various body parts, including the face, eyes, hands or feet, vomiting and or diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Symptoms can become serious very quickly. Because minute particles of these major food allergens can cause potentially even death, the staff must make sure that allergens are not transferred from food containing an allergen to a food served to that customer. This is called cross-contact. Cross-contact is a phrase that's reserved exclusively for allergens. Cooking different types of food in the same fryer can cause cross-contact. In the photo on the slide, shrimp allergens can be transferred to the chicken being fried in the same oil. Cooking does not remove allergenic proteins and is not a prevention strategy. Putting food on surfaces that have touched allergens can cause cross-contact. Example, putting chocolate chip cookies on the same parchment paper as those used for peanut butter cookies can transfer some peanut allergen to the chocolate chip cookie. We must be mindful of cross-contact. the transfer of allergenic proteins to something that doesn't contain that allergen. The kitchen staff should know every detail about everything they do all the time, including the ingredients they use all the time. But make sure you always know who to ask if you don't know. But check recipes and ingredients labels to confirm that the allergen is not present. Wash, rinse, and sanitize cookware, utensils, and equipment before prepping food. This includes food prep surfaces as well. Some operations use a separate set of cooking utensils just for allergen special orders. Make sure the allergen does not touch anything for the customer with food allergies, including food, beverages, utensils, equipment, and gloves. Wash your hands and change gloves before prepping food. Use separate fryers and cooking oils when frying food for customers with allergies. Label food packaged on site for retail sale. Name all major allergens on the label and follow any additional labeling requirements. I wanted to remind you one more time. While there's over 160 foods that cause allergic reactions, 9 of them cause 90% of the reactions. We have a new one, sesame, just relatively new, but make sure you know all 9. I like to do them like this: fish and crustacean shellfish, peanuts and tree nuts, wheat, soy, eggs, milk, and sesame. You should memorize those. Make sure you ask your manager if you're not sure of the ingredients of a food item. All right, I think we're doing pretty good. Section B, destroying harmful pathogens and preventing food contamination. Good job. Please complete the 4-question pre-exam before moving on to the next section.